Somewhere in your car's power steering module, a small rectangular chip, about the size of a fingernail, costing less than $1, is switching current on and off roughly 1,000,000 times a second. It was almost certainly made in China. It is almost certainly not on any export control list. And the company that used to dominate this market spent the last decade quietly walking away from it. The semiconductor story everyone was watching for did not arrive at the frontier. It slipped in through the back door. The vulnerable choke point everyone assumed was leading-edge logic turned out to be a 40-year-old transistor architecture that nobody thought to defend. While analysts tracked lithography machines and advanced memory stacks and sub-7 nanometer process nodes, an older, blunter category of chip was quietly changing hands. This is the story of how a dependency that took a generation to build went unnoticed because the chips involved are simply too boring to make the front page. Follow the chip and you will see the whole pattern. That fingernail-sized component in your power steering module is a metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor, a power switching device, and it is the architecture around which the rest of this story turns. Modern vehicles contain dozens to well over 100 of these power semiconductors. Not the artificial intelligence accelerators or the infotainment processors that attract coverage, but unglamorous workhorse parts, power transistors, gate drivers, low dropout regulators, and similar components manufactured on process nodes measured in hundreds of nanometers, not single digits. These are legacy node parts by definition. An electric vehicle concentrates the dependency sharply. The traction inverter alone, the unit that converts battery power into motor torque, can require dozens of high-voltage power transistors. Stack them up. At roughly fingernail size each, the pile reaches about the height of a coffee cup. Combined cost, under $50. Failure cost, a $60,000 vehicle that will not move. If a leading-edge logic chip is a Swiss watch movement, a power transistor is a circuit breaker. It does one blunt, repeated job billions of times, and the car dies without it. Nobody writes features about circuit breakers. That obscurity is partly why the supply chain story inside these parts went unreported for so long. Texas Instruments and Infineon have historically been the dominant suppliers of automotive analog and power semiconductors. The auto industry's chip shortage of 2021 and 2022, the one that idled factories and cost the industry tens of billions of dollars by various estimates, was concentrated precisely in these mature node, high-volume parts, not in cutting-edge logic. And once a power chip is qualified into a vehicle platform, switching suppliers is a multi-year undertaking. Qualifying a new chip into a car platform is like certifying a new bolt for a commercial aircraft. The part itself is cheap. The paperwork and testing surrounding it are not. Incumbency in this business is nearly structural. That qualification moat should have protected Western suppliers indefinitely. It did, until Chinese fabs found a way to price under it rather than around it. Chinese semiconductor industrial policy explicitly targeted power and analog self-sufficiency as a strategic priority, particularly after 2020, according to reporting on government planning documents in the trade press. Those specific allocation figures vary by source. Companies including BYD Semiconductor, Cylon Microelectronics, and others have publicly announced automotive-grade power chip production lines. These are the company's own claims, and independent qualification audits are not uniformly public. What is documented is the mechanism. China's domestic electric vehicle boom created an immediate, high-volume proving ground. Chinese power chips qualified first into Chinese electric vehicles, then followed those vehicles' supply chains outward into global markets. Analyst reporting across automotive trade publications has tracked this trajectory as directionally confirmed, even where exact share figures remain estimates. Here is what I think people miss about this sequence. Texas Instruments began restructuring its analog business toward higher margin product lines years before Chinese competition intensified. The retreat predates the pressure. That makes the resulting gap more ironic, not less. This is not a story about Chinese manufacturing catching up through some dramatic technological leap. It is a story about Western manufacturers choosing to leave. The dependency was not seized, it was inherited. Imagine a hardware store that decides to stop stocking standard screws because the margin is too thin, only to find a competitor has moved in and now supplies every contractor in town. The screws were never the premium product. They were the reason people walked through the door. Which brings the story to its structural core. The export control apparatus was aimed at the wrong layer. United States and allied export controls have focused overwhelmingly on leading-edge logic, advanced memory, and the extreme ultraviolet lithography equipment required for sub-7 nanometer production. These controls are a matter of public record through the Bureau of Industry and Security's published rules. Mature node fabs, those running 28 nanometer processes and above, including every automotive power chip geometry currently in volume production, are explicitly or effectively outside the most restrictive controls. The result? Chinese fabs built out capacity in the uncontrolled segment at scale with state backing into a market Western suppliers were simultaneously deprioritizing. The export control list is a long document. The mature node power chip your car depends on does not appear in it. The gap between those two facts is not a loophole, it is an architectural decision. And on the other side of that decision, there is now a factory. Everyone was watching the front door, the advanced nodes, the high bandwidth memory stacks, the lithography machines. The dependency arrived through the back door, a 40-year-old transistor architecture, unspectacular, unregulated, and now deeply embedded in vehicles rolling off assembly lines in Europe, North America, and everywhere else. I want to give the strongest version of the counterargument before I close, because there are 3 real objections here and they deserve honest weight. First, the data is murky. Market share figures for Chinese automotive power chips in trade press are analyst estimates, not audited disclosures. Tier 1 suppliers do not always reveal their second-tier chip sourcing. The dependency may be real, but smaller than the most alarming version of the narrative requires. Second, switching costs protect incumbents in both directions. The same qualification burden that let Western firms hold their positions for decades makes it slow and expensive to flip to Chinese alternatives. Design wins take years to propagate fully into vehicles on the road. Third, automotive-grade qualification requires demonstrated reliability across temperature extremes, vibration profiles, and lifespans measured in decades. The newest Chinese entrants are still accumulating that long-cycle validation data. The chips may be cheaper and may be good enough. The full proof is still in progress. I want to be honest about my own confidence here. The share figures circulating in trade press are plausible, but not independently audited. What I can say is that the directional trend is confirmed by supply chain disclosures, capacity investment data, and the incentive structure, and that incentive structure makes the trajectory nearly irreversible in the short term. Skepticism about the exact magnitude is fair. Skepticism about the direction, at this point, requires setting aside a substantial body of public evidence. The export control framework was built around a correct long-term intuition. The strategic prize is at the frontier, in the most advanced architectures, in the capabilities that do not yet exist at scale. That framework is probably right about where the decade-long contest will be decided. What it left unguarded was an entire product category, the load-bearing foundation of automotive electronics, the category your car cannot start without. That fingernail-sized chip in your power steering module, the one that costs less than $1, switches current 1,000,000 times a second, and carries no headline, is the clearest proof of the thesis. Nobody banned it, nobody needed to. The market for it had already been vacated before the controls were written. The wall they built to contain China became a map, and the road it pointed to ran straight through the part of the market no one thought was worth defending. Do you think Western automakers have any realistic path to reducing this dependency in the next decade? Or is the qualification cycle simply too slow to matter? Tell me below. I read these. If this kind of supply chain forensics is useful to you, subscribe. I go deep on the stories that do not make the front page.